team there.
And just as our normal practice these days, we are live streaming, so just a reminder of that for staff that are learning this new process and all of our elected members too. Thanks for the reminder too, Molly.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, and good afternoon, councillors. So today, Philip and I are going to talk to you about regional spatial planning and LTP growth assumptions. I'm conscious that this is both of our first time in front of you since the election. So just as a way of introduction, I am Tanya Wood and I am in the policy team, and I am responsible, I do our growth planning and structure plans and all those sorts of bits and pieces, and I will let Philip do an introduction.
Thank you, Tanya. My name is Philip Caruana. I'm a policy advisor in the policy team, and I'm usually responsible for the growth modeling and the technical side of things.
So for today's workshop, we're going to talk about growth planning, a little bit of what it is and what it's going to mean in terms of the reforms to the Resource Management Act. We're going to talk about how we're planning for the change that's coming in terms of the reform, and then Philip's going to talk about our LTP growth projections. So that's what we're going to cover today. And in terms of what we want from you, it's just really to build your understanding on spatial planning, on the reform, and then the impacts on council decision making, and to update you on our population projections. And we will also, there's an opportunity to ask any questions, and we'll also touch on our next steps from here. So when we talk about growth planning, first question that comes to mind is, why is it important that we plan for growth? So planning for growth is really important in terms of the provision of our infrastructure, making sure that the infrastructure that we need is there when we need it. If it's not there when we need it, that can cause costs. And when I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking about things that are a bit wider than pipes in the ground. Talking about social infrastructure as well, and also just making sure that the land is available for residential and business growth. If we don't have enough land available, that can push prices up, causing issues such as inflated house prices and rent increases, and also all those sorts of bits and pieces. And making sure, as we all know, the provision of infrastructure is incredibly expensive. So one way of to make sure that's as cost efficient as possible, it's staging that and making sure that it's all planned out and not disjointed and ad hoc. So that's why we plan for growth. So we have in the Taupō district, we have been growth planning for quite some time. We had TD 2050, which was our first growth strategy, which was done in 2006, and then there's been 2 more iterations from there. With the reform, there's a bit of change coming. So instead of different districts doing growth planning at a district level, we're going to be moving into a regional spatial planning forum. So what that means is that regional spatial plans will be prepared at a region-wide basis. They will look at the same or similar aspects that our growth plan looks at now in terms of provision of growth areas and constraints in terms of natural hazards and infrastructure. So in the draft legislation, it is indicated that regional spatial planning will be run by a regional spatial planning committee, which we will have a representative on that regional spatial planning committee. So the regional spatial planning committee will be responsible for preparing that regional spatial plan, but they will need to recommend to council, and council will need to approve it before it goes out for notification and then for approval at the end. It looks like hearings, so the regional spatial planning committee will be responsible for hosting the hearings, and it looks like they will be done in the different districts as well. So that's what we know now in terms of regional spatial planning. So yeah.
So when you say regional, you're talking about the Waikato region then?
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated for the Taupō district because we are in 4 different regions. But I guess one plus side is that all our urban town centres are all within the Waikato region. So yeah, that will be our biggest focus, but we will also need to be involved with the other ones.
And council will still need to approve the regional spatial plans. Right,
Yeah.
Tanya?
Yes, which is going to be interesting to see how that works in practice in a region such as the Waikato region, when 11 councils need to be approving that regional spatial plan before it's adopted. So it's going to be quite interesting to see if that bit of the draft legislation isn't going to change, how that works out in practice. So I've talked a little bit about regional spatial planning, but I haven't actually said what it is. So it's a long-term development strategy that will look out over 30 years, and it'll be based on population projections. And population projections help us identify how much residential land will be needed, as long as how much business land will be needed. It'll identify constraints, so infrastructure constraints, and then other constraints such as natural hazards, and it helps us provide information in terms of provision of infrastructure and making sure that land is available when it's needed. And I think that was it from me in terms of the growth planning, so I can hand it over to Philip.
Thank you, Tanya.
Sorry, can I ask a question about the spatial planning groups? Who will feed into who pays for those? Do we have clarity on that yet?
Great question. No clarity yet. So, yeah. And
I'm just asking because if we're expected to pay 4 different lots because we've got 4 different regions.
That is a great question, and yeah, so that is going to be really interesting to see how those costs are split up and divvied up and all that sort of thing. One thing that I didn't actually touch on that I should have is that the draft legislation has incredibly ambitious timeframes for the preparation of the regional spatial plan. So 15 months, very close. So if the legislation goes through in June, technically the regional spatial plan would need to be notified by September 2027. So that is going to require quite a bit of oomph to pull that all together.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm hoping to give you a good overview of our growth modelling. I'll try not to be too technical, but yeah, I'm aware the older councillors would have heard this already, but for the sake of the new elected members, I'll start a bit from the beginning and give you an overview of our growth modelling. So we use our population projections in most of our planning documents. It forms the foundation of any plan. It feeds into our infrastructure strategy. It lets us know how much development contributions we will be collecting. It feeds into our AMPs, asset management plans. So we put quite a bit of work to get the numbers right, or as much as you can when looking into the future. So back in 2021, it was decided that we should develop our own population growth model. Before that, we used Stats New Zealand's population projections, but every time they issued new projections, we found that they had under-projected our population. And that was causing all sorts of issues, as we will touch upon later in a slide. So it was decided we develop our own model. It's a a normal cohort component-based model, where basically we take each area in our district. There's 26 statistical area units, it's called, and we look at the demographic drivers in those areas and project population from there. The starting year, the base year is 2023, that's with the last census data. And we apply on top of that some Taupo specific drivers, in particular migration, or the number of migrants coming into our district. That's one of the key drivers of projections, but unfortunately it's also the most uncertain, so to speak. So we did quite a bit of modeling around trying to project migration in our district. This year as well, we set up a new submodel on industrial growth, and that helps us determine how much land we will need to set aside to accommodate the needs of our industrial sectors. And the link is basically with working age population. So our model produces, the projections are by age as well, age and gender. And so we can identify projections of our working age population. And so that links nicely with our industrial growth model. Yeah, as I said, so we get population projections, and by extension, we also get housing projections. So how many houses will need to be built to accommodate the projected population. And that, in turn, lets us know how much land we need to put aside for these houses to be built on. And that's the link with the future development strategy. Our knowledge team has also developed some data dashboards. They are on our website. Please have a browse and let me know if you have any questions or things you'd like to see on our dashboards.
I think Kylie's got a question.
Can I ask a question, please? So we made some interesting plan changes in the last triennium, and we're just sort of starting to see the effects of that. Does that interlay over the top as well? So, for example, the rural chapter and the lifestyle chapter, that all got changed, and then there was the ability for a 4.2 hectare block to be broken in half, which is then leading to some more supply. Do you get what I mean? Like, yes. And then, like, we've reallocated some other industrial land to industrial space. Does that all get layered over as well, even though we're not seeing the effects yet?
Yes, we will see the effects eventually when new census data is made available. If we make supply of land easier and make it easier for people to build, then yes, we will see the effects of that in the actual data, though. Currently, we don't explicitly model that in our growth model.
So it's not included in the model at this stage, looking forward? It'll only be included at the point that we get the census?
Yes, it will register it with the actual data rather than
a prediction
affecting the projections themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Wahine, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just had a question around the growth model as well. Does the growth model kind of have a layer involved in it that considers the natural environment and implications on the environment when we're considering growth, right? Because at the moment, when we get masses of rain, our stormwater overflows quite a lot. And so is there consideration to the natural environment and how always planning for growth, while it might accommodate our population and the district's growth, do we have any technical advice going on there that has heavy consideration to our natural environment and the way that we're balancing that out?
So, yeah, so thank you. So the model produces projections of population. It doesn't go into other modeling aspects. But the projections are used by our asset managers for their planning. And so our stormwater manager presumably would use this information to then model any impacts on any future impacts for like flooding and natural hazards.
So yeah, and so when we are doing our growth planning, so we've currently got a future development strategy. We'll be moving to regional spatial planning. So that sort of thing gets considered there. So we look at constraints on development, because obviously if we're identifying growth areas, we don't want them to be getting flooded from stormwater or whatever bits and pieces. So yeah, that gets wrapped up into our growth planning is where we consider it.
Thank you. One
Can I
thing.
just interrupt a minute?
Oh, sorry.
Duncan, you have a question?
Oh yeah, just a question. Perhaps you'll get onto this anyway, but since we're on growth. Look, I've just recently been presented some data which seems to indicate that Kinloch has experienced several times, well, in the past 10 years, several times the increase of resident population than every other area in the Taupō district. Did you know that, and is that part of your...
Yes, we have a slide on
Oh, okay. Yeah.
on population projections in
But
specific
by
areas.
a little...
Yes,
Okay,
by
yeah.
statistical area. And yes, you're correct. Kinloch was one of the fastest growing towns or settlements within our district.
But yeah, on that slide there, which I believe the presentation was shared via Diligent, there is a link to our data dashboard, and so that sits on our website, and that's got population and demographic data, and it's quite interesting. It shows where places have grown over time. You can do a little time lapse and that kind of thing. So I strongly encourage you, if you've got a minute, just to go and have a look at that one, and feel free to share that, because it's just on our council website. So feel free to share that with anyone in the community who may be interested.
Thanks, Daniel.
Can I just ask a question? Yes, the dashboard is extremely interesting, and I note in the Bays area, which does include touring, sort of, but your projected growth is sort of roughly $1,000 people per year. Is that permanent population, or is that homes? When you say population, we're talking about residents.
So yes, when population is referring to residents.
The actual residents. So
Yes.
how do you determine what a resident is? Because I know,
So-
like for my area, I've got lots of people who are half here and half there all the time. So what's a resident?
So the starting point is the census data, and
right.
then Stats NZ publishes what they call the subnational population estimates. So that's our starting point.
Okay, right.
Presumably, it's linked to the way they collect the information through the census.
It
we
just
then
depends
take-
where they are on the night, whether they're here or whether they're there on the night.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
okay.
Stats do have a distinction between, so if on census night no one answered, for example, or no one replied, they do have a category there, which is called resident away. We add them all up because we assume that if the resident is away, but there's a dwelling there, we add those up as well as part of the resident population.
Oh, so to affirm that's sounding more or less like holiday home owners won't be picked up in this. They'll be picked up in their hometown. I mean, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
We do. So when we translate population to households, we do make an allowance for holiday homes. So on top of the permanently occupied households, we add a share, I think around 19% district-wide, to be holiday homes. It varies quite a bit between areas. So you'll have the Western Bays have, I think, the highest share of holiday homes in the district, something like 60% of them. So we do make an allowance for that in our projections. And an assumption whether we'll still have the same share, or if that will change in the future, if we'll see fewer holiday homes or not. one thing I wanted to mention as well is that we will be coming to you as part of the LTP process to adopt the population projections. So it's, yep, that will be later on. Okay, so this is, I guess, the key chart that the model produces. It shows our population in the next 35 years, so up till 2060. So we start from 1998 till 2023, as I said, that's the actual data. And we go on up to 2060. So the black dotted line is our medium growth scenario, and that's the scenario that asset managers use for their planning. And the blue shaded area is basically capturing the uncertainty in the projections. And the bottom end of the shaded areas are our low growth projections, and the higher end is the high growth projections. And I've put also there in the red dotted line, that's New Zealand's projections.
And that's 5,000 in the next 5 years. Where do you expect that growth specifically to be? Have you over that at present? Basically in the Taupō town area, is that where you're expecting the growth?
In the next slide, I will be showing for some of our towns, but yes, the Taupo urban area would be where the majority of the persons will be going.
Can I just check whether or not our growth projections count with, well, guesstimate whether they are people coming into the area, or is this a growth of the families that are in Taupo already? Are they locals, or are they? So
thank you, councillor. So it's both. One of the key inputs is migrants, and by migrants I mean it's split into two. So you have people coming in from abroad straight into Taupo, and then there's people who were living somewhere else and relocate.
Moving away from big cities.
Yes, and relocate to Taupo. Again, that's a key driver, in fact, of our population.
Can I just ask on the Statistics New Zealand predictions? Is that a New Zealand, or is that a factor put in for Taupo?
So that's the Taupo projections produced by Stats New Zealand for the district.
Okay. Because Taupo being quite popular, I would have thought the growth factor here might be greater than, say, in a number of other places.
Yes, but I mean, we look at our district's population, right, and we compare it with what our model is producing. At least it is Stats New Zealand's projections is still within the shaded area, so at least it is within the uncertainty around our medium scenario, but still quite lower than ours.
So Stats New Zealand, they do projections at a nationwide level, but then they also go down to region and district as well. So they will factor in the different factors influencing different districts in terms of growth or decline in some areas.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'll just point out, this is my observation / prediction. There's a lot of digital nomads nowadays. I count myself as one of them actually, because my work is up in the city, and it's the power of the internet and all that allows people to relocate to places like this if they want. And I see the greatest hurdle to even more people coming here is opportunities for secondary and tertiary education, actually, and let's say a tech institute set up in Taupo, another secondary school or something like that. I reckon that would really ramp things up.
So that's one of the pieces that we've identified in the future development strategy, because one of the consultation pieces that came through a lot was that people felt that the health facility offering wasn't adequate for population growth. And I mean, that's outside of council's realm, but that is something that we've said that we will advocate in the space for those social services like education facilities and medical facilities to help encourage those to happen to cater to our growing population.
Can I just check one more on the data thing? When you're talking about those projection growth, does it cover the age groups where you believe though that growth is going to be? Because are we saying...
So yes, the model produces projections by age year or age bands. So we will have, yes, we will have, or you could get the projections by age bands and gender as well.
So is this a natural growth where we're getting older, or is this an older group coming in to live for their golden years?
So it's both basically. So the model projects natural growth. So we input factors like birth rates and life expectancies and kids per person and all these variables, and that gives us the natural growth, which if you project do the projections using those variables only, population does how do you say it, does flatten out eventually.
Yeah, I'm just wondering,
But
do we have, are we in a position like, I suppose, Invercargill was at one point where their whole population was getting, it was in the older end, and the younger ones were flying the nest and never coming back?
Yes, so it is, life expectancy is getting old, and the average age is getting older, but keep in mind that we also have, or at least in recent years, we had quite a few migrants coming in, and they are a mix, so you get older retirees from major cities coming to retire to Taupō, so that pushes up the average age, but you also get younger families that also come and reside here, so that again reduces the average age. So we plug all of this in the model, and it produces the projections.
Carly.
Not a question, but a comment, just because you're questioning. Being involved with the ministry and being on a school board, and they only take the census data when they make their predictions. So in 2018, we had a blooming school age group of children, but their census data said that the district's population was ageing, so they wouldn't consider another school for the Taupō district. So very interesting. If you don't like to have a model like this, it's never going to be perfect, but it's better than taking one set of data like some entities do. So it kind of, I don't think we'll ever get the predictions right, but it's better than sticking with one.
Yeah, so that's exactly right, and I think that's what those the red line, the difference between the red line and the black line show on that graph, because the Stats New Zealand takes their approach, and then Philip does our growth model, and really lucky to have Philip, who's here within the organisation, and you know, he knows the nuances of the district, so he can factor those in compared to you know, projections that are done in Wellington. But as Councillor Leonard said, that is the challenge when we're advocating with these government organisations, because they generally just rely on the Stats NZ projections, and the reason they do so is to have an even playing field across the district when you're allocating, across the country when you're allocating those funds. But that is a challenge for places like Taupō.
Yvonne.
Just talking about the collection of data from Stats NZ, because it was, you know, a total stuff up some years ago, let's just be polite, and you know, they've obviously changed their model, so how are they collecting, I'm just interested, how are they collecting their data now to give you information?
So do you mean from the census? Because yes, the census is not going to be the same as it was in the past. Now they are going to collect data using what they call an administrative approach. So they will go to agencies that already have information on people, basically, and they collect as much information as they can from this administrative data, and then they will use survey, as much as I could understand, they will use surveys to fill in the gaps, basically. I was following these developments, and I will keep doing so, but it seems like they are not so clear what will happen exactly once, since they remove the census framework, basically, which presumably will add to the uncertainty, I guess. Okay, so going back to the chart, so we are projecting an additional 24,000 people by 2060, and that translates to 10,000 more homes, roughly. That's district-wide. And that's using the medium growth scenario. Obviously, if we go to the high scenario, it will be higher. I think it will be around 14,000 homes. Okay, so I've put in some projections for some of our towns and cities, settlements, sorry. A caveat around when you look at projections at this level, uncertainty would be higher, just because some data like migration, it's a bit sketchier when you go down to this level, but it does give us some direction of growth for these smaller towns and settlements. So like you mentioned, Councillor Campbell, Kinloch had the fastest growth in our district. It basically doubled and more over the last 15 years. And same with Turangi. Turangi was quite surprising. It had, for a long time, it had a declining population, and now it's back to where it was in 1998. And although we're not expecting large growth in Turangi, we do expect some growth to continue there. And yes, and Mangakino, for example, it has been declining as well, but we're expecting it to level out, as you can see there.
Can I just ask, the Kinloch phenomenon, if you like, so you're predicting it flattens out from now on. I mean, why do you think it's going to do that as opposed to keep on going?
There will be some growth in Kinloch. It's just we're not expecting it to be as steep as it was in the last decade or so.
So can you just educate me? What drove it in Kinloch in the last decade, as opposed to anywhere else?
So one of the main drivers is migration as well. So, and again, it's people coming from other towns and cities.
Oh yeah, I'm just wondering why Kinloch and not anywhere else. I'm just interested.
I mean, presumably because of the area itself is a desirable area to be in, and possibly because of the higher house prices and land values there. So maybe there is some investment opportunities that people saw.
No, okay, but you're predicting it'll that was a phase, and it's just going to moderately pretty much the same as everyone else.
At least in the medium scenario, we're not expecting such a rapid growth as we saw in the past.
Okay.
Kinloch's also constrained in terms of its wastewater treatment plant that has been designed to cater for a population. So that is a constraint for,
And we do have these types of projections for each SA2 area. So we'll have Hilltops and Richmond Heights for Iwaka. We have like 24 of them, basically. Okay, so that's where it links back to the future development strategies or regional spatial plan soon. So basically we know, or we have an idea of how many new homes we will need to plan for. And the future development strategy lets us identify where we think these houses will be built. In the maps in front of you, so on the left-hand side, there's Taupō urban area and Kinloch. On the right top area, it's Turangi and Western Base. And the bottom right, it's Mengekino. The shaded areas in green are what we currently have zoned. So basically they are good to go, or largely good to go now, or within the next decade at least. Within this decade.
Philip, I'm surprised to see Motuopa's not in there.
I don't think there are any large developments in Motuopa.
It's reached the maximum, has it? Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And
You go.
I was just going to say that the red shaded areas will be developments where we think they will be ready to go beyond the next decade, so in the next 15, 20 years.
So those red areas have not been rezoned yet. What the future development strategy does is that indicates that's where growth should go, and then later on down the track, when that land's needed, a plan change process will happen to rezone that land.
Could I just ask, that little orange area just south of Whareroka Point, so that's Māori communal land there. I mean, it's obviously developable, but I'm just wondering, have you got something we don't know, that something's going to happen, or you just like it to happen, or?
No. So these land areas were identified way back in the previous growth strategy, the 2050, and we simply carried them forward in our current FDS, Future Development Strategy.
So that's just on your wish list. I mean, it's
No, not exactly. These were identified when the TD 2050 strategy was done, I think in 2018, was it, Tanya? So, and presumably, I wasn't here with council, but presumably they did a district-wide review to identify which land would be suitable.
But Duncan, you probably may not be able to see the screen, but it says future residential growth, that orange shaded area. It's just been marked for future.
Yeah, so these are growth areas identified in our future development strategy.
Can I just double check where you've got the green? That means what you've projected, those areas are good to go within those projections you've done?
Yeah, so green means zoned, it's residentially zoned, and it's ready to go. Well, it's ready to go because it's residentially zoned.
Okay, so it's not that it's green, that it's all good to be able to accommodate those extra 1,000 people?
Not exactly, so there's some nuance here. So the model simply gives us a number. So in our case, we need to find space for 10,000 households in the next 40 years, 35 years. So that's just the number.
Oh, I'm just looking at Turangi, for example, there. So do we know in Turangi that we've got enough there to cope with the future growth?
And that was going to be exactly my point, my next point, basically.
Sorry, I'll steal your show these. I'll leave you to it.
So we do match the two of them. So we take the numbers that the model produces in terms of the houses that we need, and then we take the identified land areas, land parcels in the future development strategy, put in some assumptions around density. So is it general density, is it low density? And then we match the two. And ideally, the identified land areas, the ones that you are seeing here, are enough to meet what the model is projecting that we will need. When we did that exercise, we found out that yes, we have enough to meet medium growth projections, but not enough to meet high growth projections. And that's also assuming that all of these parcels of land will be developed within the time period we need them to be developed, so within the next 35 years, and to the scale that we assumed. So if we assume general residential, but then it turns out that actually they built to low density residential, then we won't have enough, even more. So that's why we have been doing some work around maybe identifying other areas in our district, just so we make sure we have enough identified land areas to meet high growth demand. And when I say identified, it's different from zoned areas. So when we identify them in our strategy, it's like saying, hey, these are areas where you could reasonably put houses on. Whether they will actually be developed in the future, that mostly depends on the market.
Do we, when we're identifying land, do we take land that is already in private ownership, or does that include Māori land?
So when we are identifying potential future growth areas, there are some criteria that we need to look at. So just things like we don't want to be putting development on land that is prone to natural hazards or anything like that. So we have a look around that. We consider things like the provision of infrastructure and how easy and hard that is. And so we have a look at all those things, and then we identify potential areas. So we're going to talk, we will have another workshop in the future on this, because we'll talk a little bit more about that. But certainly we talk to landowners, and before they're incorporated into a regional spatial plan or anything like that, it goes out for consultation. So there is bits and pieces in there.
But you do consider Māori land as well, initially?
Yeah.
Even though it's not owned by council?
Yeah, so a lot, most when we're identifying growth areas, most of it is in private ownership.
Okay.
The land.
Maybe I can help, just jumping in there, having been on private plan change for Nukaho. If you have a look at where Taupō word is there, the green area, most of that will be the private plan change area, which is, none of that is owned by council. It is zoned residential, and that's in multiple owners. There's probably, sorry, memory's a bit hazy, but there's about 4 or 5 different owners came together and wanted that private plan change. So that's that. The large orange or brown, depending on how good your colour is, along Acacia Bay Strait, most of that is Rangatira E land. And that would be entirely 100% dependent on what their aspirations and desires are. Nothing to do with council imposing our will on them, but there is a need for council to have, I think it's 30-year horizon in terms of residential land available. So if, for example, Rangatira E were to have plans that, oh, this is good for forestry now, well, that would be a conversation we'd need to have, obviously. But that would create some significant difficulties for us in terms of our obligations under the National Planning Standard. But it does not mean we're obliging necessarily any individual landowner to do anything specific.
Wahine.
Yeah, I just had a question around the data that you collect from Stats New Zealand. Is that the primary source of data you use, or do you, for example, with the likes of other ethnic groups who may not be as engaged with Stats New Zealand, like the Māori community, are we just relying on the information that's provided by Stats New Zealand, or if not, how are, for example, iwi demographic insights integrated into the council forecasts?
So yes, we only use statistics, New Zealand census data, because that's the official source of information. As again, the model currently is not equipped to do projections by ethnicity. We could do something simpler to identify future population by ethnicity, but it will kind of be a bit rougher than what we currently model. So yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important to add, though, that when Stats New Zealand are preparing their projections, they're not relying only on the census. They know that not everyone fills out the census, so they do look at other information that they may hold and do a bit of substitution and that kind of thing, because we know that not everyone fills out the census.
Yeah, and I guess it's just, for me, I think it's so important because it's that data, that helps us to make population projections, but population projections alone can either empower or marginalise communities over the next 30 years. So I think it's just so important that the data that we receive is accurate when we're making, future growth strategies and stuff like that. But yeah, agree, appreciate where you guys come from.
And I believe stats do allowances for those who do not fill the census. So if half the people fill the census, they don't just say, oh, that's the population. They do make an allowance for that. It's just probably not by ethnicity, though.
Yeah, I think last census, one of the district health boards in Northland was actually put out a plea to his residents saying, please fill out the census, because the more people who fill out the census, it really helps, and then we'll get more funding. So yeah, it does highlight that point, but yeah, they do some substitution.
Duncan.
You're going to point out something about these plan changes, and it's a practice that some councils do, and I'm not convinced this council never does actually. And I know that this happens because I had a family member who was affected by this. But when council designates, say, rural to residential zoning, rates on residential land is much higher than rural. So, I've had a family member in the past who they had their rural zone redesignated to residential, and the council immediately tried to charge them residential rates. And he tried. It was my father-in-law actually. He battled the council. It's up north. This council, not this one, and he was forced to sell the land because he couldn't afford the residential rates. Does that ever happen here?
We're probably getting a little off subject, but there's worthwhile just reminding us of the process you have to go through for rezoning, which is multiple rounds of consultation through the RMA. In Schedule 1, I'll get some nods out the back or not, and that's long before that your rates change, and then you also get the chance to object to your rates process too. So perhaps just worthwhile, just not necessarily going down that path today, but there's a lot of work to get to rezone.
Well, maybe as I brought the subject up through the chair of the private plan change in Nukaha, that was at the specific request and the invitation of all of those landowners. It's what they wanted to happen, not anything this council imposed on anybody unilaterally or arbitrarily.
Well, I'm just pointing out that it's never everybody who wants a change, and I'm just interested to know, because I thought it wasn't the case, but I'm interested to know would this council start imposing residential rates on residential zoned land, whether it's developed or not?
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was led to believe that this council did not practice that actually, but okay, right.
Just reiterating that the zoning process or changing a zoning process has to go through at least 2 rounds of consultation, and then there's obviously a right of appeal. and then you go through a rating process where you also have the chance of appeal too. So just reiterating for those that are listening, that while residentially zoned land is charged residential rates, there is a whole process to go through to change the zoning.
Please carry on.
Thank you. So having seen a picture of the residential growth in our district, we also do projections for industrial growth because we need to identify land for that purpose as well. When we did our numbers, it turns out that we do have sufficient land currently for the short and medium term, so that's for the next 10, 15 years, we have enough land, but not enough to meet our long-term needs, at least how they are projected. In the chart, we have modeled 2 scenarios. In scenario 1, the blue bar chart, it assumes that any underutilized land in the model will be freed up and be made available. And by underutilized industrial land, we mean parcels of land that currently the economic activity being carried out on them can be carried out somewhere else. So things like parking lots, for example, or storage sheds. We think that's an underutilization of that land and it can be used better. And so given that uncertainty, we created its own scenario basically. But scenario 2, which is the red box, assumes that none of that land is made available, and which means that we will need to identify more land for industrial growth. If you take the medium scenario again, it indicates that we will need between 67 and 109 hectares in the long term, so beyond the next 15 years. In the case, and that's in the Taupo urban area, industrial land. In the case of Tuorangi, we saw that there's quite a bit of industrial land sitting vacant, and we are looking at rezoning some of that to residential, potentially. In the case of retail and commercial, our colleagues from Amplify do an audit every 6 months, and they concluded that we have sufficient land for that purpose, even going to the long term.
Philip, just a
Yvonne.
query on the numbers there. That includes any council-owned land that's zoned, isn't it? It's included in those figures.
Yes, if it's zone industrial, then yes, it's included. Okay, and one of my last slides is to
Before you go, just going back to the Tuorangi, you just made a little
sorry,
comment
Councillor.
about you're looking at rezoning some of it residential. Have you had representations from the landowners to do that?
So I'll just talk to that one. So
Yeah.
that is, so we know that the zoning, there's sufficient land in Tuorangi, but the zonings aren't quite right. So that's something that will be looked at, but with the draft replacement legislation for the Resource Management Act, we're not actually allowed to do any plan changes for the next 3 years. So that's something that will be worked on ready for our land use plan, which will replace our district plan. So that's just something that we're aware of and will be worked away in the background, but nothing's happening immediately.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, just touching upon the issues when planning is misaligned with our projections. So on the left side, we are assuming that we overestimate growth. And I'll go quickly through it. I know there's a lot of text, but it's useful to know the consequences of getting things wrong, I guess. So if we do overestimate growth, so let's say we take the medium growth scenario, but population turns out to be closer to the low scenario, what that means is that we build infrastructure that's larger than we need, it will cost us more to run, and that translates into higher rates. On the other hand, if we underestimate growth, as it was happening when we used Stats New Zealand's data. We build infrastructure that's smaller than it's needed, and it will be more expensive to resize it. So think about like digging pipes from the ground, or building a bigger water storage tank and things like that. So again, it will translate into higher costs, and this time also on developers, because we will be charging development contributions on that. Higher cost of the asset itself, which is collected through rates. And there's also something Tanya touched upon before, that we would send the wrong signals. That basically we'll need fewer schools, we'll need fewer clinics, and fewer businesses will be willing to open up here if we say that growth is going to be low. And again, there's some social costs as well, like congestion.
I could just point out something I'm familiar with, and as an example of overestimating growth. There used to be a council down Christchurch, Akaroa District Council, which overspent on, it was either water or wastewater infrastructure, and went bankrupt, and ended up getting sucked in by Christchurch City Council. This is quite a few years ago, but I suppose that's a pretty good example of extremely...
Yes, and I mean, that's why it's important we keep on top of our projections and adjust our modelling if we see that we are off track from the medium scenario. And again, it's an advantage to have our own modelling, so we can respond to that.
All right, so in summary, hopefully we've convinced you that growth planning is important. So we have sufficient residential developments for medium growth, but not for high growth scenario. We have sufficient retail and commercial land, and in the long term we need more industrial land within proximity to Taupō town. In terms of next steps, we are looking towards the regional spatial planning forum, what that looks like. So we are looking at potential residential and industrial growth areas that can be incorporated into that regional spatial plan in the future. So we are doing some work on that, and yeah, we'll look to come and talk to you sometime in the near future about around those potential areas. And also Philip can talk to the growth assumptions.
Sorry,
Yes.
can I just check whether or not your team, I suppose, is anticipating any changes to the way you operate because of that regional group? Or is it just going to be, business as usual, just more people to report to?
Great question. Don't have all the answers on that one yet. It'll be we'll see what the time brings.
Kylie,
I guess.
Kylie.
Just in regards to the industrial growth stuff, so I had a conversation with a large business owner that was looking for warehouse spacing, thinking that it needed to be in an industrial zone. Turns out that residential, you could put something like a warehouse on within rules currently. Do we have a way to share that information with people that they can easily, like people thinking they need one form of class land, whereas perhaps they don't necessarily need that class of land? Does that make sense? We're all trying.
Yeah, that is a great point, and it's certainly a challenge that we have, that people think, that it's got to be there where it doesn't necessarily be. So I guess that's something, as we talk to planning consultants, we're trying to educate them, and hopefully it will filter out.
Duncan, you have a question?
Oh, yeah, just a question about industrial growth. Where do you get? How are you confident that it'll grow at all? Where do you get your projections for industrial growth from?
So it's a mix. We developed our own modelling on that. and it's based on OLS regression, which we have currently got an external advice on. We also used, for the short term, we also use infometrics projections. I guess that's us.
Yeah, so on our next slide, if anyone wants to have a look, that's a link to the future development strategy. But we'd just like to extend a big thank you for listening to us today. We've had some really engaged questions, so appreciate, you taking part.
On behalf of the team here, we'd like to thank you for the work you've done. A lot of responsibility rests with you to get it right, because the future does depend on making sure we've got enough land ahead of us and providing for it, plus the infrastructure, and that we don't over-provide. Anyone else got any questions? Steve?
Just thanks. It was also nice to have the presentation ahead of time, just to use to make notes while you're presenting. So thanks.
Thank you.
So thank you guys, appreciate the effort there. I think we'll stop and have a 5-minute break